The wind screamed through Okuru village like a wounded beast. Thunder shook the earth so hard that clay pots tumbled from shelves and children cried beneath their mothers' wrappers. Inside his small mud hut, Ease pressed his weight against the door, trying to keep the storm outside. Water poured through cracks in the roof, soaking his sleeping mat and pooling around his last bag of yam seeds. "Not the seeds," he whispered, dragging the bag toward the driest corner. "Please, not the seeds." His hands were rough and cracked from 3 seasons of failed harvests. The other farmers had given up on him, calling him cursed. Even his neighbor Oba laughed openly, saying, "Ease plants hope and harvests dust." But Ease never stopped trying. Lightning split the sky, flooding his hut with white light. In that brief flash, he saw his empty cooking pot, his torn blanket, his calloused feet. Then he heard it, a sound so faint it was almost swallowed by the storm. A soft, desperate chirping. It came from just outside his door. Ease froze, listening. The chirping came again, weaker this time, like something dying in the cold. His hand moved toward the door. Ease pushed the door open. Wind slapped his face and rain soaked his shirt instantly. He squinted into the darkness, searching. There, half buried in mud near his doorstep, a tiny bird lay trembling. Its feathers were stiff with ice, its wings folded tight against its shivering body. "Leave it!" a voice shouted from across the compound. It was Oba standing in his own doorway. "That thing is bad luck. The storm brought it, let the storm take it back." Other neighbors peered through cracks in their doors, shaking their heads. "It's a curse, Ease," an old woman called. "Don't touch it." Ease knelt slowly in the mud. The bird's eyes were closed, its tiny chest barely moving. It was dying. He had nothing. His harvest had failed. His stomach was empty. His future was uncertain. But he could not watch something suffer. Gently, Ease scooped the bird into his palms. It was so light, like holding a handful of air. His body was cold, far too cold. "You're a fool, Ease," Oba shouted before slamming his door. Ease stepped back inside, cradling the bird close to his chest. Inside his hut, Ease moved quickly. He gathered the last pieces of firewood, thin sticks he'd been saving for cooking, and built a small fire in the corner. The flames sputtered weakly, struggling against the dampness. Ease blew gently, coaxing the fire to grow. Slowly, warmth began to fill the hut. He tore a strip from his only blanket and wrapped the bird carefully, leaving just its head exposed. Then he placed it near the fire, close enough for warmth but far enough to stay safe. The bird's eyes remained closed. Ease watched it for a long moment, then reached for his small clay bowl. Inside were 3 crumbs of cassava bread, his dinner and tomorrow's breakfast. He crumbled one piece between his fingers and held it near the bird's beak. "Come on, little one," he whispered. "Live." The bird's beak opened slightly. Ease pressed the tiny crumb inside. The bird swallowed weakly. Relief flooded Ease's chest. "Good. That's good." He fed it 2 more crumbs, then ate nothing himself. As he lay down on his damp mat, exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. The fire crackled softly. The bird rested. But just before sleep took him, Ease noticed something strange. The bird's shadow on the wall, it didn't look like a bird at all. It looked like a man. Morning arrived with surprising silence. The storm had passed, leaving the village muddy but calm. Ease opened his eyes slowly, his body stiff from sleeping on the wet mat. He turned toward the fire, it had burned out hours ago, and froze. The bird was standing on his wooden table, fully awake, its feathers clean and bright. It looked at him with eyes that seemed far too aware, far too knowing. "You're alive," Ease whispered, smiling. Outside, voices rose in confusion. Ease stepped to his door and opened it. Neighbors stood in the compound, staring at his hut with wide eyes and open mouths. Every other roof in the village had been torn or damaged by the storm. Fences were broken. Crops were flattened. But Ease's hut stood untouched. Not a single thatch was missing. Not a single wall had cracked. Oba walked closer, his face twisted with suspicion. "How is your hut still standing, Ease? What did you do?" "I did nothing," Ease said honestly. "I only sheltered the bird." "That bird is a witch spirit," Oba hissed, pointing. "You've brought a curse on yourself." The other villagers murmured in agreement, stepping back. Ease said nothing. He turned to go back inside but stopped. The wilted plant beside his door, the one that had been dead for weeks, was now blooming with bright yellow flowers. Days passed and the bird never left Ease's side. It perched on his shoulder as he worked in the fields, its small claws gripping his worn shirt gently. At first Ease thought it was coincidence. But soon he couldn't ignore the strangeness. Wherever the bird sang, the soil softened. Ease's hoe cut through earth that had been hard as stone for months. Seeds that should have taken weeks to sprout pushed through the ground in days. His neighbors noticed too. "Look at Ease's field," one farmer whispered, pointing. "His crops are already growing while ours stay dead." Oba stood at the edge of Ease's land, arms folded, eyes narrow. "It's not natural. That bird is doing something." Ease ignored them. He worked from sunrise to sunset, singing old songs his father had taught him. The bird would tilt its head and hum along, its voice clear and strange, like wind chimes made of light. One evening, as Ease rested beneath a tree, a group of children approached shyly. "Uncle Ease," one boy said, "we are hungry. Our mothers have no food." Ease's heart ached. He looked at his small basket of newly sprouted yams, barely enough for himself. But he smiled. "Take them," he said, handing the basket over. "Eat well." The children ran off laughing. Oba watched from a distance and shook his head. "Fool." That night, Ease dreamed of golden clouds descending slowly over his farm, humming the same song as the bird. The next morning, Ease woke to find his field shimmering with dew, thick, heavy drops that clung to every leaf and stem. He stepped outside confused. The sun was bright. The sky was clear. But his field was soaking wet as if it had rained all night. He turned and looked at the other farms. Dry, cracked, dusty. Only his field was wet. Oba stood at his own fence, staring in disbelief. "How?" he muttered. "How is your field wet when it didn't rain?" Ease had no answer. He looked up at the sky, then down at the bird perched on his shoulder. The bird blinked once, slowly, like it was smiling. "You're blessed, Ease," an old woman said from the path. Or cursed. Time will tell which. That afternoon, Ease shared a portion of his fresh harvest with a widow who lived alone at the edge of the village. She wept with gratitude. Oba saw this too and scoffed loudly. "You'll feed the whole village and die starving, fool. Keep nothing for yourself and see where it leads." Ease turned to him with calm eyes. "Better a full heart than an empty soul, Oba." Oba spat on the ground and walked away. That night, as Ease lay on his mat, he heard faint drumming, soft, distant, rhythmic. He sat up. The bird was staring toward the window, perfectly still. Ease listened closely. The drumming seemed to come from the sky itself. The next morning, as the bird preened its feathers by the window, something fell. A single feather drifted down, shimmering faintly blue in the light. It landed softly on Ease's table. Ease picked it up carefully. It was warm to the touch, and when he held it close, he could hear a faint hum, like a song trapped inside. He placed the feather inside a small calabash for safekeeping and continued his work. But all day the feather stayed on his mind. There was something about it, something powerful, something alive. That evening he sat outside his hut, watching the sunset. The bird perched beside him, silent and still. "Who are you, little one?" Ease whispered. "What are you?" The bird did not answer, but its eyes glowed faintly in the fading light. As darkness fell, Ease heard it again, the drumming in the sky. Louder this time. Closer. He stood and looked up. The stars were bright, scattered across the heavens like scattered grain. But among them Ease saw something strange. A shape, tall, human, standing in the clouds, was watching him. Ease's breath caught. He blinked and the shape was gone. But the drumming continued, soft and steady, like a heartbeat from above. The next day, Ease went to the market to trade some of his harvest for salt. As he walked through the stalls, an old woman grabbed his arm. Her eyes were milky with age, but her grip was strong. "Boy," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "When the heavens send a sign, a test always follows. Be ready." Ease frowned. "What do you mean, Mama?" But the woman released him and shuffled away, disappearing into the crowd. Ease stood still, unease creeping into his chest. That night, the bird grew strangely silent. It did not sing. It did not hum. It only stared toward the distant mountains, unblinking. Ease tried to sleep but couldn't. The drumming in the sky had stopped. The air felt heavy like the moment before a storm. He woke before dawn and reached for the calabash where he kept the feather. The feather was glowing. Ease's heart pounded. He turned toward the bird, but the bird was gone. The table was empty. The window was open. Ease rushed outside calling, "Little one, where are you?" The village was silent. The sky was dark. No sign of the bird anywhere. All that remained was the glowing feather in his hand, humming softly like a heartbeat. He searched everywhere. He climbed trees, walked through the fields, checked the riverside, called until his voice grew hoarse. But the bird was gone. His hut felt emptier than it ever had before. The silence pressed against his chest like a stone. He sat on his mat, holding the glowing feather, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: loneliness. "Why did you leave?" he whispered. The feather pulsed faintly in his hand, warm and alive. Days passed. Ease continued to work his field, but the joy had drained from it. The crops still grew, but slower now. The dew no longer appeared. Neighbors whispered as he passed. "The bird left him," one said. "Maybe the blessing is over. Or maybe the curse is just beginning," another replied. Oba watched from his doorway, arms crossed, a smug smile on his face. "I told you, Ease. Sky spirits don't stay with fools." Ease ignored him. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window holding the feather, staring at the stars. "Where are you?" he whispered into the darkness. Then he touched the feather. It hummed. And suddenly the feather began to glow brighter. The light spilled across the walls, forming shapes, symbols Ease didn't recognize. The symbols shifted and moved, forming an image, a mountain surrounded by clouds. Ease's breath quickened. Then a voice, deep, distant, and impossibly gentle, whispered his name. "Ease." Ease stood frozen, staring at the glowing symbols on the wall. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. "Who are you?" he whispered. The feather pulsed again, brighter this time. The symbols twisted and reformed, showing the same mountain. But now, a golden path led toward it, winding through clouds. The voice came again, softer, like wind through tall grass. "Come." Ease's hands shook. He didn't understand what was happening, but something deep inside him, something older than fear, told him to trust. The next morning he wrapped the feather carefully in cloth and placed it in a small pouch tied to his waist. He packed nothing else. No food. No water. No extra clothes. If the sky was calling him, he would answer. As he stepped outside, Oba appeared, blocking his path. "Where are you going, Ease?" "To find the truth," Ease said simply. Oba laughed. "You're chasing a bird that abandoned you. You've lost your mind." Ease walked past him without another word. The other villagers watched as he left, shaking their heads, whispering that he would never return. But Ease didn't look back. He walked toward the hills, toward the mountains, following the pull in his chest that grew stronger with every step. Above him, the sky rumbled softly, not with anger but with anticipation. Ease climbed for hours. The path grew steeper, the air thinner. His legs ached, his throat was dry, but he did not stop. The feather in his pouch grew warmer, guiding him like a compass. By midday he reached the top of a hill and paused, breathing heavily. Below him, the village looked small, tiny huts scattered like seeds across the earth. He turned and continued upward. The wind picked up, swirling around him, pulling at his clothes. It felt alive, like invisible hands pushing him forward. "Who are you?" Ease called into the wind. "Why did you come to me?" The wind answered with a low, rumbling sound, not words but something close. Ease kept walking. As the sun began to set, he reached a strange valley. Giant stone faces lined the cliffs, each one carved to look toward the sky, their mouths open as if singing. Ease walked slowly between them, his footsteps echoing. Then, one of the stone faces blinked. Ease stumbled backward, heart racing. The stone face turned its eyes toward him, slow and deliberate. Its mouth did not move, but a voice filled the valley. "Why do you follow what you do not understand?" Ease swallowed hard. "Because kindness understands no fear." The stone face stared at him for a long moment. The stone face's smile widened, cracks spreading across its surface like roots. Then, slowly it crumbled into dust. The dust swirled upward, forming a shape, a tall figure woven from wind and light. It was a spirit. The spirit stood before Ease, faceless but somehow watching. Its voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Many have walked this path. Few have spoken truth." Ease's legs trembled, but he did not run. "I speak only what my heart knows." The spirit tilted its head, considering. The sky watches all. He sees the proud, the greedy, the cruel. But he also sees the kind. Ease's breath steadied. The bird? Was it him? The spirit did not answer. Instead, it raised one hand, and the air before Ease shimmered and split open, revealing a swirling doorway made of clouds. "Enter," the spirit said. "And see." Ease hesitated. Beyond the doorway was only mist and light. He could not see what lay on the other side. But the feather in his pouch grew hot, almost burning against his skin. He stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the cloud, the world shifted. The valley disappeared. The stone faces vanished. Ease stood now on a golden staircase that rose into the sky, stretching endlessly upward into the heavens. The spirit was gone. Only the wind remained, whispering in a voice that sounded like the bird's song. Climb. Ease placed one foot on the first step. It glowed beneath his weight, warm and solid despite being made of light. He began to climb. Each step hummed softly as he touched it, sending vibrations up through his legs. The wind swirled around him, carrying voices, soft, distant, familiar. He heard his mother's laughter, his father's songs, the voice of a friend who had died years ago. Tears filled his eyes, but he kept climbing. As he ascended, images appeared on the steps beneath him, scenes from his life, glowing like paintings made of light. He saw himself as a boy, sharing his meal with a blind beggar. He saw himself as a young man, carrying an injured dog home through the rain. He saw himself giving away his harvest to hungry children, even when his own stomach growled. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, lit up beneath his feet. Isa's chest tightened with emotion. He had never thought much of these moments. They were just what felt right. But the sky had been watching. The staircase grew steeper. The wind grew stronger. Isa's muscles burned, but he did not stop. Finally, after what felt like hours, the staircase ended. Ise stepped onto solid ground, or what looked like ground. It was made of cloud, soft and white, but firm beneath his feet. Before him stretched a city in the sky. Ise stood still, his mouth open in wonder. Floating islands drifted lazily through the air, connected by bridges of light. Rivers flowed upward, defying all reason, sparkling like liquid silver. Trees grew from nothing, their branches heavy with fruit that glowed like stars. And everywhere, winged beings moved silently, their faces calm, their eyes kind. They did not speak, but they watched him. Ise felt small, unworthy. He was just a poor farmer with dirt under his nails and holes in his shirt. But the feather in his pouch pulsed warmly, reminding him why he was here. He walked forward, his bare feet silent on the cloud ground. The winged beings parted as he passed, bowing slightly as if he were someone important. Ise didn't understand. At the center of the city stood a massive throne, carved from thunder itself. It crackled with energy, glowing with shifting light. And perched on the throne was the bird. Isa's breath caught. It was the same bird, small, delicate, with bright eyes. But now it radiated power. The air around it shimmered with heat and light. The bird tilted its head, watching him. Then it spoke. You came. Ise fell to his knees. I didn't know. I didn't understand. The bird hopped down from the throne, its tiny claws clicking against the cloud. You were not meant to understand, it said gently. You were only meant to care. The bird began to change. Its feathers shimmered and dissolved into light. Its small body grew, stretching upward, expanding outward. Wings of lightning spread wide, crackling with energy. Ise shielded his eyes, but he could not look away. When the light faded, the bird was gone. In its place stood a figure, tall, radiant, dressed in robes woven from storm clouds. His face was kind but powerful, ancient but ageless. His eyes glowed like molten gold. He was the sky god. Isa's entire body trembled. He pressed his forehead to the ground, unable to speak. The sky god knelt beside him, placing a warm hand on Isa's shoulder. Rise, Ise. Ise lifted his head slowly, tears streaming down his face. My lord, I am nothing. I am no one. Why did you come to me? The sky god smiled, a smile full of warmth and sorrow. I walked the earth as the weakest creature, to see who would show mercy when no reward was promised. Many saw me and turned away. Many mocked. Many feared. He paused, his voice soft. But you gave warmth when you had no fire to spare. You gave food when your own stomach was empty. You gave hope when the world had given you none. Ise wept openly now. I only did what felt right. That, the sky god said, is why the heavens chose you. The sky god stood and gestured toward the glowing city around them. I watch the earth always. I see the proud who crush the weak. I see the rich who hoard their blessings. I see the powerful who forget compassion. His voice grew heavier. But I also see the kind. The ones who give when they have nothing. The ones who love when the world offers only cruelty. He looked down at Ise. You are one of those. Ise shook his head. I'm just a farmer. A poor man. I have failed more than I have succeeded. Failure is not measured by wealth, the sky god said. It is measured by the heart. He raised his hand and a torrent of golden light poured down from the sky, swirling around Ease like a river of stars. Ease gasped as the light entered his chest, filling him with warmth, with strength, with something he could not name. I give you a gift, the sky god said. Not for yourself, but for those who mocked you. Not for revenge, but for redemption. The light intensified, blazing brighter and brighter, until Ease could see nothing but gold. Then, darkness. Silence. Ease opened his eyes. He was lying on his back in his own field, staring up at the morning sky. In his hand was a single seed, glowing softly, pulsing with life. Ease sat up slowly, his head spinning. His body felt different, stronger, lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted. He looked at the seed in his palm. It was small, no bigger than a bean, but it radiated warmth. He heard voices approaching. The villagers were coming, Oba at the front, his face twisted with suspicion. Where have you been, Ease? Oba demanded. You disappeared for 3 days. People said you went mad and threw yourself off a cliff. Ease stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. I went to find the truth. Oba laughed bitterly. And did you find it? Or did you find more foolishness? Ease didn't answer. He walked to the center of his field, knelt down, and pressed the glowing seed into the soil. The villagers watched, confused. What is he doing? Someone whispered. More madness, another replied. Oba folded his arms, smirking. This should be entertaining. Ease pressed his hands flat against the earth and closed his eyes. He whispered the words the sky god had spoken to him in the light. Not for myself, but for those who mocked me. Not for revenge, but for redemption. Then the earth shook. People stumbled backward, gasping. Cracks spread across the ground, glowing with golden light. And from the soil something began to grow. The seed erupted. A single stalk shot upward, thick and strong, reaching toward the sky. Then another. Then 10. Then 100. Within moments the entire field was covered in golden grain, tall, shimmering, glowing like sunlight made solid. The air filled with a sweet, warm scent. The grain swayed gently even though there was no wind. The villagers stood frozen, mouths open, eyes wide. Children began to laugh, running toward the field. Elders fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. It's a miracle, the old woman whispered. The heavens have blessed him. Oba stumbled backward, his face pale. He stared at the golden field, then at Ease, then back at the field. How? He croaked. How did you? Ease turned to him, his face calm. I only planted what was given to me. The golden grain shimmered, reflecting the sunlight in 1,000 directions. It looked like the field was on fire, but with light, not flame. One of the elders stepped forward, trembling. Ease, what are you? Ease smiled softly. I am what I have always been. A farmer. A neighbor. A man who believes kindness matters. He gestured to the field. This is not mine. This is ours. The sky has given it to the village, to feed the hungry, to heal the broken, to remind us that mercy is never wasted. The villagers wept openly now, falling to their knees, reaching out to touch the golden grain. The next days were unlike anything Okuru village had ever seen. Ease invited everyone to harvest freely from the golden field. Young and old, rich and poor, all were welcome. He built a long table from bamboo and clay and set it in the center of the village. Every evening he cooked meals from the golden grain and served them himself. The grain was unlike any food they had ever tasted. It was soft, sweet, and filling. One small bowl could satisfy hunger for an entire day. Even those who had mocked Ease came to eat. Even those who had called him cursed and foolish. Oba came too, though he did not speak. He sat at the edge of the table, his head down, shame written across his face. Ease placed a bowl in front of him without a word. Oba looked up, his eyes red. Why? He whispered. After everything I said, why do you still feed me? Ease smiled gently. Because the sky taught me that mercy does not keep a list of wrongs. Oba's face crumpled. He covered his eyes with his hands and wept. Forgive me, he choked. I was cruel. I was blind. I was wrong. Ease placed a hand on his shoulder. You are forgiven, my brother. That night, as the villagers ate together under the stars, something beautiful happened. The sky opened. Golden birds, hundreds of them, descended from the clouds, circling the village, singing the same melody Ease had heard so long ago. The song of the golden birds filled the air, wrapping around the village like a warm blanket. People stopped eating and looked up, their faces glowing with wonder. The birds circled lower, their wings shimmering with light. They did not land, but they hovered close, as if watching, as if blessing. Children laughed and reached toward them. Elders closed their eyes and swayed to the rhythm of the song. Then the clouds parted. Rain began to fall. Not heavy rain. Not storm rain. But soft, gentle rain that touched the earth like a kiss. It was the first rain Okuru village had seen in months. The villagers gasped and lifted their faces toward the sky, letting the rain wash over them. Some danced. Some cried. Some simply stood still, arms open, receiving. Ease looked up and saw something that made his breath catch. Within the clouds, faint but unmistakable, was a face, the face of the sky god, smiling down at them. His voice echoed softly, not with thunder but with warmth. Your kindness opened the heavens. Then the face faded, leaving only rain and light and the song of golden birds. Ease fell to his knees, tears mixing with the rain on his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. The golden field never withered. Season after season, it bloomed with the same abundant harvest. No matter how much was taken, more always grew. Ease became the village elder not because he demanded it, but because the people chose him. They came to him with disputes, with questions, with broken hearts, and he listened always with kindness. He taught the children to share, to be gentle with the weak, to see past appearances. He told them the story of the frozen bird again and again, until every child in the village knew it by heart. Remember, he would say, the sky is always watching. Not to punish, but to see who cares when no reward is promised. The village changed. People who once mocked now helped. People who once hoarded now shared. People who once turned away from suffering now ran toward it. Okuru became known across the land as the village of kindness. Travelers came from distant places, curious about the golden field and the man who tended it. They always left different than they arrived, softer, kinder, quieter. Oba, once Ease's greatest critic, became his closest friend. He worked beside Ease every day, planting, harvesting, serving meals to the hungry. I wasted so many years being cruel, Oba said one evening as they sat together. Ease smiled. Those years taught you something important. Now you teach others. Years passed. Ease's hair turned gray. His back bent slightly from decades of work. But his eyes remained bright, and his smile never faded. One evening as he sat outside his hut watching the sunset, a young traveler approached. The traveler was dirty, exhausted, and hungry. His clothes were torn and his feet were bare. Please, the traveler said, I have walked for days. Do you have food? Ease smiled and gestured to the table. Sit. Rest. The traveler ate slowly, tears streaming down his face. I have been to many villages, he said. Most turned me away. Some threw stones. You are the first to welcome me. Ease nodded. A long time ago, I learned that the greatest among us sometimes come disguised as the least. The traveler looked at him curiously. Who taught you that? Ease smiled and pointed to the sky. A bird. The traveler laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Ease's face remained serious. It's true. The sky god once came to me as a frozen bird. I warmed him. I fed him. And he changed my life. The traveler's laughter faded. He stared at Ease, searching his face for deception, but found only truth. Do you regret it? The traveler asked. Giving away so much? Ease shook his head. I regret nothing. I have more now than I ever dreamed, not in gold but in peace. That night, after the traveler had gone to sleep on a mat inside the hut, Ease sat alone under the stars. He heard the familiar sound, the soft drumming in the sky. He smiled. You're still watching, aren't you? He whispered. The wind picked up gently, brushing against his face like a hand. Then, a single golden feather drifted down from the sky, landing softly in his lap. Ease picked it up, his chest tight with emotion. It was warm, humming softly, just like the first one so many years ago. He held it close and whispered, I have not forgotten. I will never forget. The feather glowed briefly, then faded into light, dissolving into the air. But the warmth remained. Ease closed his eyes and felt a deep, unshakable peace settle over him, the kind of peace that comes only from a life well lived. Above him, the stars shone brightly. And among them, barely visible, golden birds circled silently, keeping watch. The sky god had never left. He had only been waiting, watching to see if the lesson would last. It had. And it would continue, passed down through generations, carried forward by every child who learned the story of the frozen bird and the farmer who cared when no one else did. Years later, when Ease was very old and his time on earth was nearing its end, The village gathered around him. Children sat at his feet. Elders stood close. Even travelers who had heard of him came to listen. "Tell us the story one more time, Elder Ease," a young girl asked, her eyes wide. "Tell us about the bird." Ease smiled, his voice soft but steady. "It was a night when the storm was angry and the wind was cold. I heard a small cry outside my door." He told the story slowly, savoring every detail. The frozen bird. The warmth of the fire. The mocking neighbors. The golden field. The sky god's face in the clouds. When he finished, the village was silent. Then one elder spoke. "What is the lesson, Ease? What should we remember most?" Ease looked at the golden field, still blooming after all these years. He looked at the faces around him, kind faces, open faces, faces that had learned to love. "The lesson," he said softly, "is this: kindness to the small is the seed of miracles from the great." He paused, his eyes distant, as if seeing something beyond the present moment. "The world will tell you to protect yourself first, to hoard, to fear strangers, to mock what you don't understand." His voice grew stronger. "But I tell you, the heavens are always watching. Not to judge your wealth or your status. They watch to see what you do when no reward is promised. They watch to see if you will warm the frozen, feed the hungry, shelter the lost." A young boy raised his hand. "But Elder Ease, what if we have nothing to give?" Ease smiled warmly. "Then give what you have. A kind word. A gentle touch. A moment of your time. The sky god did not come to me because I was rich. He came because my heart was open." The children nodded, understanding blooming in their eyes. That night Ease lay on his mat, his breathing slow and peaceful. Through his window he saw the stars, bright and countless. And there, perched on his windowsill, was a small bird with golden feathers, watching him with knowing eyes. Ease smiled. "You came back." The bird tilted its head and sang, one pure, perfect note that filled the room with light. "I never left," it seemed to say. Ease closed his eyes, still smiling, and let the song carry him home. The next morning, the village woke to find Ease had passed peacefully in his sleep, a gentle smile still on his face. They wept, but not with despair. They wept because they had lost a father, a teacher, a friend, but they also wept with gratitude for having known him. They buried him beneath the golden field, in the soil that had fed generations. And as they covered his body with earth, something miraculous happened. The golden grain began to glow brighter, spreading beyond the original field. It stretched across the entire village, then beyond, covering neighboring lands, reaching toward distant hills. Everywhere the golden grain touched, the soil became rich. Crops that had failed for years suddenly bloomed. Water that had dried up returned to the wells. The blessing Ease had received was now multiplying, spreading like light across the land. And every harvest season afterward, without fail, a flock of golden birds would descend from the sky, circling the village, singing the same haunting melody. Travelers who heard the story came from across kingdoms to see the golden field and learn the lesson. "How did he earn such fortune?" they would ask. And the villagers would smile and reply with the same words Ease had once spoken. "He only warmed a frozen bird." The story spread far and wide, told around fires, whispered to children before sleep, carved into the walls of temples. And the lesson remained clear. Kindness to the small is the seed of miracles from the great. The heavens do not measure your wealth or your power. They measure your heart when no one is watching. Give warmth when you have little fire. Share bread when your stomach is empty. Show mercy when the world shows you none. For you never know, the stranger at your door, the suffering soul you pass by, the small creature in your path, might be a test sent from the sky itself. And how you respond will determine not just your reward, but the legacy you leave behind. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. But in Okuru village, the golden field still blooms. And on quiet nights, when the moon is full and the wind is gentle, you can still hear it, faint but unmistakable, the song of golden birds circling in the darkness. And if you listen closely, you might hear something else too. The soft, grateful chirping of a small bird, once frozen and dying, now eternal and watching, reminding the world that mercy is never wasted, kindness is never forgotten, and love is the language the heavens understand best. When you care for the least among us, you may be entertaining angels, or gods, unaware. Give freely. Love deeply. The sky is watching.